Hello, good morning. Welcome back to part 2 of my festive series of videos about nursery rhymes and their origins in the county of Somerset. It's coming up to 9:45 on Monday the 29th of December, and I'm back at the pivotal point I spoke to you on the last video from Radstock. I said last time on the video this used to be an old coal mining town. There was a big Somerset coalfield around here, and the last pit closed in 1973, I believe. I remember seeing it on the local news actually. Didn't appreciate the relevance at the time. There's loads of nods to it. This old pit wheel as a memorial at the bottom of the hill, busy road from Bath to Shepton Mallet. There's lots of these two-dimensional miners statuettes there. There's the Radstock Museum there, and that's got a coal mining exhibition in there. So last time we went to Jack and Jill Hill. I'd come in along the Somerset and Dorset Railway. This is the site of its old station. Now I backtracked slightly, crossed over onto an old former railway, the GWR line, and I headed back in that direction to Kilmerston, Jack and Jill Hill. Well, today we're going off this way, and we're going to climb out of this coal mining valley up through the small village of Hayden, and there's some references to the coal mining heritage there. We'll look back down on the valley, and then we're going to head up to the East Mendip village of Holcombe, a village set up high up on East Mendip, and it's claimed to be the origin of the nursery rhyme Ring a Ring of Roses. We'll look into that origin story and see if there's any evidence to support it or whether it's just a myth. But one thing that definitely happened is there was a tragedy involving 5 children known as the 5 Lambs that occurred at Christmas in 1899. So we'll pay tribute and doff our hat to that tragedy. And there's also the parents of a famous explorer buried up there. So that's what's happening. We're going to go up to Holcombe, literally 2.5 miles from Kilmerston along there, and en route we're going to pass Jack and Jill Hill, so let's get going. We've climbed up quite a steep hill out of Radstock, out of the valley, but this is probably less than a mile. We're coming into the old coal mining village of Hayden. The road we're on is actually called Kilmerston Road, which is where we were the other day. So it tells you a bit here about what was here. The Kilmerston Incline, the self-acting incline and tramway at Kilmerston Colliery were constructed in 1877 to exchange coal at the sidings of the GWR Frome to Radstock Railway. That's the one we took out to Kilmerston the other day. There's one of the coal wagons. As I understand that, the full ones going down would have dragged back up the empty ones just through gravity. Tells you there a bit about its history from February the 6th, 1874. Pit closed in 1973. This might have been the last one actually, along with Lower Rislington Colliery. As I said, I remember that as a teenager being featured on the local news. There's one of these lovely two-dimensional sculptures. So back to today's plan. We're actually heading out to Holcombe, which is actually over that way. We could carry on up this hill, but I'm going to go this way. I'm pretty sure this was the site of the old pit, which is why it's been converted into housing and industrial units. We're going to climb up past that tower there, drop down, and that'll bring us to the top of Jack and Jill Hill. I'm going to stop my Garmin at Jack and Jill Hill and then reset it from 0 and measure exactly how far it is from there by bicycle to old St Andrew's Church, known as the Plague Church, and some think it's the origin of the nursery rhyme Ring a Ring of Roses. According to Google Maps it's 2.4 miles. Well, we'll see what it is according to me on a bicycle. So up past that tower, then there's a lovely drop down to Jack and Jill Hill. That's a bit of a lung burster and a handlebar creaker up there, but we're at the top, this phone mast transmitter. We're looking down on the industrial estate. Well, I'm pretty sure that was the site of the old colliery. Can you see along the hill line along there, if you go along trees and a few buildings, pylons, Then there's what looks like a volcano. That's an old spoil heap or an old slag heap from another colliery. Anyway, just over the summit is a lovely drop down. I'll try and film that actually, then I'll speak to you at Jack and Jill Hill. Here we are over the summit of the hill. Look how lovely it is around here, very rolling. Probably getting quite a little bit of wind noise on this camera. I hope this should be the last time on my videos that happens, because I think I've worked out a fix and it's being delivered today actually. I love coming along here, I really do. Look, school. We're coming up to that Jack and Jill school with the ornamental well in its playground. And here we are. This is the top of Jack and Jill Hill. It's where I spoke to you the other day. Right, let's go down here to the well and reset one of my Garmins. That's it beeping to tell me I've gone off course. That's the road bending around there, so I've just come down to the ornamental well. The Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Well, and there it is, plastic pail. So I've just stopped one of my Garmins. I'm going to start it there as a ride, so it'll start from zero. And just my own curiosity, I want to know exactly how far it is from here, Jack and Jill Nursery Rhyme, to the alleged source of the Ring of Roses nursery rhyme. According to Google Maps, it's 2.4 miles, but we'll see. So I'm going to start my ride. There we go, start. So we're going to retrace just a few yards there, turn left and ride up to Old St Andrew's Church at Holcombe. And yes, there is a new church. I'll tell you the story why there's two. After leaving Jack and Jill Hill, I rejoin that road, turning left, then you eventually get to a T-junction. It's a fairly busy B road, and then you turn right on that for about a quarter of a mile before you turn left up here, signposted Holcombe. And that is it, up on the top of the hill there. That's pretty much where we're heading for. And then we're going to turn off right and go down behind where those houses would be a bit further, and that's where the old church and the old plague village used to be. Okay, we climbed up to where that farm looked like it's at the top of the hill when I spoke to you last, and then you go up to what looks like a few scattered farmhouses and dwellings. Then it climbs up a little bit further to another sort of ledge, and then it does this final climb up here. A few scattered dwellings around here. We're still a good half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from the church. But just round the next corner, there'll be one of those brown historic church signs pointing us off to the right. And that's our destination for today, Old St Andrew's Church. In fact, there it is. Just an anecdote about when I came up here once before. It was midwinter. There was all these ducks walking along here. Not just one or two, lots. And I've got to say, all the traffic was really stopping so it didn't run them over. There's the boundary sign for Holcombe, look, but we're going down here to its old church. Hold that thought in your mind for a few minutes about the ducks, because I can explain that down here. Holcombe Old Church only. So this is the no-through road. And this is taking us down to where the medieval village used to be and its church. When I saw those ducks, because I'd been past here several times, I thought, oh, they're probably from here. It's quite a lot. I'd never seen more than about half a dozen here. But still a little bit confused. There were dozens and dozens back there, it really was. And I eventually found out the answer down here about 40 minutes later. It's Posty doing a U-turn. Can you see on the top of the hill there, the big tower? That's the Abbey at Stratton-on-the-Foss. It's a Roman Catholic school there. And it's what I call East Mendip Abbey. In many ways I prefer that to Wells Cathedral. I think of Wells Cathedral as West Mendip and that abbey as East Mendip Abbey. So this is the site of the old medieval village, about a mile from the modern village. Still can't see the church, but you can see all these like grassy mounds, very pronounced. And as we come down to the end of this track, a gravel car park, you eventually see the church suddenly appear. And here it is, ladies and gentlemen, our destination for today, Old St Andrew's Church. So the distance here is 2.43 miles. So I'd say Google Maps was very, very accurate. I'll let them off 300ths of a mile. And here we are, St Andrew's Church. This is one of my favourite places in Somerset, it really is. I first came here when I was doing a project a couple of years back. I was visiting all the Churches Conservation Trust properties in the historic county of Somerset. Huge, huge county, it really is. And this was one of them. And I couldn't get in because it's normally kept locked. But there is a way to gain access, so I didn't realise at the time. If you go to the Churches Conservation Trust website, it'll tell you how to gain access. Although there are open days, most Saturdays and Sundays during the summer. I think these are 2 lemon trees. I saw on one of the occasions I came here to let myself in and look round, there was an upcoming summer picnic in the churchyard to celebrate the opening season of the church by the local residents. And I came to that, and you know, sometimes you hear that local villages are a little bit unfriendly or can be a bit distant to outsiders. So I came here not sure what to expect. I've got to say I was made to feel so welcome. And Marie, the Churches Conservation Trust local coordinator, was just fantastic. She had done all these flapjacks for people. She didn't know how many were going to come, and I think she was quite overwhelmed by how many came. And it's such a wonderful day. I've got a photograph of that, me sat over there. So the old village was here, and it was thought by locals that all those mounds over there were burial mounds for the dead, because it had been decimated by the plague in the 1300s. But when you actually look further into that, it's not the case. It seems to be a natural migration up towards the new village of Holcombe. I guess because there's a better road network there, it's not quite as out the way, and I think it's marshy and boggy down here in those days. I will put a few slides up based on academic and peer-reviewed research and local archaeology digs. It was not abandoned because this church was still used for 500 years, right up to the Victorian era, when people did then find most of them had moved away, and it was a bit of a trek down here on a Sunday. And also this church was suffering from a lot of structural problems, and they decided rather than spend a lot of money renovating it, they would build a new church in the village, and that's called St Andrew's New Church, which we can just zoom across to quickly now. Voila! And here we are. About a mile away in the modern village of Holcombe. This is new St Andrew's Church. War memorial in the churchyard. And one of these lovely two-dimensional statues paying tribute the armed forces in the First World War. But can you notice something? Apart from the memorial cross, there's no graves in the churchyard, no resting places. This church was built then to replace the old St Andrew's Church as a much more convenient place for the villagers to come to worship, and it was opened at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. Okay, let's head back to the old church. So this church was used for that 500 years, but gradually more and more people moved away to the village, which is why they built that new church. But did you notice from that new church there's no graves in its churchyard? The reason being is that was the agreement, the understanding when they built that they would not bury people there, they could only be buried here. And if we go around the back, you'll see where the local council has purchased land to extend the churchyard. The day I came here for that picnic a couple of years ago, it was the first Saturday of their opening season. They had a guide here, and she was also saying the Channel 4's Time team came here and they did some excavations and they couldn't find any evidence of mass burial sites here either. What they did find was traces of an old Roman road, and when I leave I'm going to be heading over that way actually, up towards the Abbey at Stratton-on-the-Foss. And that is the Foss Way. I'll be riding a part of it. So that would make sense, wouldn't it? You know, a Roman road, say from there down to here. What also developed alongside the plague church myth was the children's nursery rhyme, Ring a Roses, originated from here. But again, historians dispute that. I mean, there's versions of it in America, and also some of the versions don't even refer to a tissue, you know, the disease and the awful down the death. It was more to do with curtsy, so that there's so many discrepancies and inconsistencies. I'm going to save the tragedy of the 5 lambs towards the end of the video, but while we're here, let's wander around the churchyard. And remember me saying about the ducks? There were so many up there, and that small duck pond didn't really explain it. And I started hearing lots of quacking here. And as I walked around the churchyard, it got louder and louder and louder, almost overpowering. And I was kind of drawn towards it. And here we are. This would be the chancel window. The north wall and the north churchyard. And as I said, the local council have purchased this land off a farmer, so locals can carry on laying their deceased to rest here. I heard all this duck quacking and it became so loud here, and I suddenly realised if you go down behind the church there's a river down there, or a stream, and I thought that's the most likely explanation. There is a gate here, although you cannot get through, as private property. So that drops steeply down to a little river. I can just see it flowing by here actually. In fact, it's normally a stream in the summer, but it looks like it's really overflowed with all the recent rain. And I saw a big black circle up there, and I used my camera to zoom in because that's where this noise was coming from. It's almost overpowering by the time I got here, and it was a big circle. It was black from a distance, and it was the ducks. And just to the left of it there was a farm vehicle, a tractor, and right in the middle of the circle was this guy, and he was just dishing out all the feed to the ducks. So he'd drawn them all in, and the sound of the quacking was just unbelievable. So I always remember that when I come here. Now I looked it up afterwards, there's a big duck farm over there. Didn't even realise there's such a thing as a duck farm. So yeah, whenever I come here I always think of the ducks. And this is the view from the modern churchyard. I just didn't want to film that couple because they've come to lay some flowers at a grave. So that's a local couple by the look of it, leaving some flowers to relatives maybe. So I think it's time to leave that part of the churchyard. So this is the north side of the church. The bell tower facing out west. And that grave there, family plot, is of the parents and the brother of Scott of the Antarctic. I believe the father was a manager at the brewery that was part of the village for many years. Scott himself, I looked it up, is still buried in Antarctica, and I mean in, you know, the famous story about they perished in a tent. Well, when the rescue team got there many months later, they found the tent and they literally just buried the bodies with a cairn as a shrine, and that's gradually sunk down into snow over the years, so it's probably deep inside Antarctica now, drifting towards the sea. So one day, many years from now, he probably will get a burial at sea. But that's his brother and his parents resting there. Just a quick return to St Andrew's New Church. Right opposite, which is what looks like a parking bay, is called Scott's Close. Whether that's any relevance or connection to Scott of the Antarctic's family being from here, I don't know. I'll leave that to your imagination, but it's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it? There is a very sad story here that is factual and very well documented. And I'm going to go over to the grave shortly and take my hat off and pay respect, but I'm not going to film it, not for a YouTube video. The sad story then, very briefly. In December 1899, a few days before Christmas, 5 children from a local school were on their way home, and they went ice skating on some frozen water, whether it was a pond or a stream, I'm not sure, and it cracked and 5 of them drowned there. And a local farmer tried to rescue them. It was too late, and it just shocked the whole village, and their burial took place here on Christmas Eve of 1899, and it said 1,000 people turned up, so it devastated the village. I'm going to go over the grave and take my hat off and bow as a mark of remembrance. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this festive two-parter about nursery rhymes and their connections to a couple of villages close to each other in Somerset, not far from where I live. My own plans for the new year, I referred to it earlier on about the wind noise for the camera. What I'll do is, when I get it all set up, I'll actually do probably a bacon sandwich on a picnic table ride and tell you about my upcoming plans for next summer. I decided in November what I wanted to do for my cycle tour next June. In fact, I was scratching my head for a few months, because normally it comes quite quickly. After one holiday, I almost instantly know what I want to do the following year. But I was a bit lost this year. I'll outline what my plans are for June, and it's all based on a book by a lovely guy called Andy. So in the meantime, I'd just like to wish everybody a very, very happy new year. Health and happiness for you, your friends and your family in 2026. Bye for now.